Forget one-size-fits-all diets. With Noom, you get a personalized weight loss plan that's tailored to your lifestyle. Have cravings? Food FOMO? Noom can help you lose weight while still enjoying your favorite foods. Noom's users love the flexible approach, blending psychology and biology to help you lose weight in a way that's sustainable for you. Plus, you can rest assured Noom's approach is grounded in science. They've published more than 30 peer-reviewed scientific articles describing their methods and effectiveness. Stay focused on what's important to you with Noom's psychology and biology-based approach. Sign up for your trial today at Noom.com.
I did see a shirt in the stands that just said, "All my homies hate Dolly Parton."
It's the arrival. I came in the league, went straight for the title.
Intercepted! Rod Moore! And Michigan will win the game! Touchdown! Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvelous!
Hail, hail, Michigan, the champions of college football.
There's nothing quite like the game.
Michigan versus Ohio State.
This is The Rivalry, proud to be part of the Varsity Network from Learfield and sponsored by Elevated Integrity Construction.
Welcome to another episode of the Rivalry Podcast. I'm JP. That is Jace. A little different episode with the holidays, but we're here ready to talk some college football playoffs. If you've paid attention to the show before, we like to open things up with a little wheel route. Going to do the exact same thing today. Slightly different. Because I have some stuff that I actually want to make sure we talk about. So the opening round of the college football.
You're just picking what you want us to do.
I'm just picking the wheel route today. The
what
question
happens when I go on
is,
vacation?
What are your thoughts after this opening round of the college football playoffs?
Well, I'll tell you the first thing that comes to mind for me is what we've been saying for weeks, which is there are not 12 teams that deserve to be in the playoffs.
Oh, yeah, I think that was clearly evident.
Yeah, I mean, and again, there's a sense in which, you know, when you open the field, you're going to have the likelihood for more blowouts. And that doesn't mean that it's like, well, there are other leagues. I saw Klatt talk about this, right? Like there's other leagues that do this. Should we blow up the NFL playoffs? Like, no, but you don't need 12 teams in college football to see who the best one is. SMU is a good, they deserve to be in the 12-team playoff, but we don't deserve to have 12 teams in the postseason. Yeah. We don't need that. You need, I still don't know that you need to go more than 4. You certainly don't need to go beyond 8. And I think that was pretty evident by the way that Ohio State and Notre Dame and Penn State and Texas, even though they kind of tried to let slip there at the end, I think it's pretty evident that you don't need more than 8 teams. So this talk about, well, what if we expand to 16? It's like money talks, I guess, but we don't need, the 16th ranked team in the country is not the best team in the country, and there's a reason for that.
And we talked about that, and I think I even said it a couple of podcast episodes ago, where my first thought when I was watching this past weekend games, especially I'm watching the Notre Dame game versus Indiana, and I'm watching SMU Penn State, and I think the Texas Clemson, at least when I was able to watch it, felt somewhat competitive. I mean, I think everybody knew Texas was going to win, but of the weekend games, that was the most competitive one. And
even that, Texas pulled out to a 21-point lead before Clemson tried to come back.
And even that, but you're looking at SMU Penn State, and Penn State just looked like the completely better team in every aspect. You look at Indiana, Notre Dame, the exact same story. And I'm watching those teams, and I'm going, I get why SMU, I get why Indiana were rewarded and they were put in those spots. Did they deserve it based off what they accomplished in the season? Yes. But I don't think that there's a person that watches football on a consistent basis that would tell you that an Alabama, and you know me, this is not me being like super pro Alabama, but I'm looking at some of these other teams and I'm going, Alabama puts up a better game against Penn State. Alabama puts up a better game against Notre Dame in my mind. And do I necessarily think that it changes the outcome? No. So does it ultimately matter? No. But I do think, just from a football fan, I was a little disappointed going into these opening rounds. I expected, in my mind, I already knew they were going to be a blowout, but I was hoping at least the Notre Dame and the Penn State I thought would be blowouts. Clemson, Texas, I thought Texas would still win. Tennessee, Ohio State, I don't think anybody in this world thought that was going to happen. We'll talk more about that later. But I was watching those games just disappointed that they weren't even remotely competitive. And I think that was my biggest disappointment from this weekend was I didn't expect the lower seeded team to pull off an upset this year, but it just didn't live up to the hype for me.
Well, and here's what I'll say too is, this is where we talked about this at length last episode. And so, I don't need to revisit too much, but like that's where like you and I disagree on, well, Alabama would have given a more competitive game. Well, which Alabama? The Alabama, the Alabama that showed up in big moments against top teams, or are we talking about Alabama going into Norman? Mm-hmm. Are we talking about Alabama Vanderbilt? So that's where, Lane Kiffin is sitting on his couch tweeting the entire afternoon, which on the one hand, like as a podcast and a media outlet, like I appreciate. Thank you for the free content.
But can we take a second to say how atrocious it was during the Tennessee-Ohio State game for him to tweet out, "Go Vols"? If Ryan Day went out and would have tweeted, "Go Penn State," torches would have been outside of his house.
Honestly, well, they already have been, and we'll get to that lately.
More would have joined.
But like the Lane Kiffin thing, like, and the reason I connect that too is, Ole Miss would, Alabama would give him a better game. Ole Miss would have. Really? Which Ole Miss? The Ole Miss that lost to 4-8 Kentucky? The Ole Miss that lost to 6-6 Florida? Like, yeah, maybe the good version of Ole Miss and Alabama shows up, but maybe they don't. Maybe the bad version of Alabama Ole Miss shows up the way the bad version of SMU showed up. Maybe the good version of SMU would have won that game. That's it really even carries over into some of this nonsense. And I'm gonna kind of jump ahead a little bit. Some of the nonsense I've seen from the Ohio State fan base where it's like, well, this version of Ohio State is unstoppable. We will wax the floor with everybody if this version shows up. Yeah, well, what if that version doesn't show up, my guy?
And
what if
that's
the version
always
that played
the case.
Nebraska and Michigan shows up?
That's always the case.
It's ridiculous.
That's always the case. I don't think it makes it untrue because I think you look at the strength of schedule, you look at the teams they play, and you look at a team like an Oklahoma, and I'm not 100% sure an SMU can beat an Oklahoma. And I just think that goes back to what we talked about earlier in the year with, well, if this such and such a team had a different logo on their helmet, they'd be treated different. Like Ole Miss and Alabama, I'm sorry, like I have no sympathy for a 3-loss team that got left on the outside. I'm with you on that. I just think at the end of the day, if you were selecting which game would you be more excited to watch, SMU Penn State or Alabama Penn State? Everybody's playing, everybody's healthy. What do you think is a better game? And I think you're going to answer Alabama Penn State. Regardless.
Absolutely. But again, like we said last week, then we may as well not even play a regular season. We may as well go right now and say, well, Michigan, Texas, Ohio State, Alabama, and we may as well just pick the 2025 field right now.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. But I think that's the issue. I think we agree, but just in different ways. There's 12 teams is entirely way too many, but I agree. Correct. An Alabama and Ole Miss, they missed their chance. And that's just how it is. That's the way it's going to be. That's the problem with having a 12-team playoff is you're going to have teams that don't deserve it, that aren't better than teams that get left out. And those teams are going to get left out. And you're going to have games like this more often than you're not. And I think what people are really excited about is for this next round, and the rounds going ahead. And even then, I look at some of these and I'm like, all right, so Texas has to beat, let me check, Arizona State. Cool. All right, well, let's make them a semifinalist already. And you look at Penn State and you go, oh, cool, they get to go against checks notes. Boise State. Cool. James Franklin's going to be insufferable.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's where we agree, right? Like we talked last time about the way that the system's flawed and about the need for the need for conference champions, maybe get an automatic berth but not an automatic bye as a potential, and then the need to reseed within that as well. Though, as far as the reseeding goes, even though Arizona State and Boise didn't deserve the bye, the reseeding actually kind of happened almost, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's 1v8, 2v7, like it kind of worked out that way. Just the teams sitting at 3 and 4 probably don't deserve to be at 3 and 4, but that's the way that it rolled out. Yeah. I mean, I think, and this is going to be part of it too. Like you are going to have, you may have blowouts in the next round here, right? Like you may have blowouts in the next round here. Some of that's inevitable, but also, and that doesn't mean, well, 8 is now too many. It just means that you need to be able to logically look at this and go, hey, I don't know that, a 3-loss Ole Miss should be on the cusp of the college football playoff. Looking at a March Madness style tournament, right? Where let's just throw in somebody remarked on Twitter this week and said, let's just open it up to like 135 team bracket just to see what Purdue can do.
Yeah. Oh,
like at some point you go, we don't need this.
There's a sick part of me that I would love that. Just give me a solid week of nonstop football.
Just elimination style. I think Purdue got that when they played Indiana and got beat by 66.
Like a wrestling Royal Rumble, just last man standing type thing. I'd be all for it. I did have a second part to this wheel route. That's a little abnormal than what we typically do. But after watching,
it's Christmas, man. This is the gift.
We're giving you an extra gift. After watching the first round, which player impressed you the most? Who had the biggest performance for their team in the opening round?
Oh, man. I mean,
I know it's going to pain you to say what you want to say.
Well, there's 2, and Will Howard's one of them. Will Howard would be one, and I think Jaden Blue would be the other, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to. I know our producer's going to yell at me for looking up his stats real quick here. 2 touchdowns for 145 yards or something like that. Yeah. I mean, I'd say Jaden Blue or Will Howard have to be the answer there.
Yeah. I thought Will Howard as well.
I thought Will we'll get into this, but like, and again, this will sound odd if you've not listened to the podcast, like you're the Michigan guy. What are you talking about? Because like I'm a Michigan guy, but also as strong as my opinions are going to be, like you also have to be able to tip the cap sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. Like Will Howard had a really good day. I thought, the touchdown pass to the second one to Jeremiah Smith, there was a lot made about Jeremiah Smith, on that touchdown. I don't think it matters if that's Jeremiah Smith or not. The ball is perfect. And it had to be. All he had to do was pull it in, and Will Howard is the one who made that touchdown. But I thought he was efficient. There's controversy around the interception, whatever. But he limited his turnovers. He was, he wasn't under a lot of duress. We'll get, we're starting to get into more of the X's and O's there.
Yeah.
But I thought Will Howard played really well. I thought Jaden Blue played a phenomenal game for Texas. I think either of those would be the right answer for me.
Yeah, I think the Will Howard is an easy choice for me, but I wanted to be a little bit different because of how I am as a person. So I actually chose the Ohio State defensive line as just a whole group.
That's not a person.
It is when they play as well as they did. They are one person. They applied pressure all game long. They helped stop the run game. I thought they were super efficient in a game that, as much criticism as they faced coming off the Michigan loss, and as much criticism as JT and as Jack Sawyer have faced throughout their career, both of them had themselves a day. I was really impressed with the amount of pressure they were able to get on Tennessee. They were in the backfield almost every single drive, forcing him to either run or make a pass on the run. I thought they had a major impact in that game.
I don't think that they were what was being maligned from the Michigan game, though. I don't think anybody was concerned about the defense.
I think when people talk, and I've been guilty of this myself. I think I even said it the last podcast. Jack Sawyer and JTT have been underwhelming in the sense compared to what we've had in the past with the Bosas and the Chase Youngs and all that.
Sure,
and I think a lot of people talk about them but I think a lot of people talk about them in the big games not being able to apply that pressure. You've talked about JTT and the joke that, well, it's Penn State, so he'll show up. But outside of that, what has he done for me? And you look at those moments, and people said, well, the Jack Sawyer interception against Michigan was his career play. Had it turned into anything.
Yeah.
But it didn't. But that's what people were hanging their hat on, is these are 2 guys that we brought in that were part of a highly recruited class that in the big games don't produce. And whether you 100% agree on what effectiveness looks like from that position, because I think a lot of people strictly look at sacks and not pressures.
Correct.
I would fall in line more so that in those big games, they don't have the disruption that I would love to see from people like that. But I thought they did this past weekend.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that too. I mean, can we? Here's a genuine question as we kind of head into Ohio State, Tennessee, because it's one of those things where, like, I'm going to kind of preempt my own answer to this question. There are certain players that, like, if they play for you, you're like, okay, I dig this,
yeah,
right. And then there are guys who it's just like, yeah, even on my own team, this kind of annoys me. Like, Jack Sawyer has become like just one of the most unlikable football players. Like and obviously, like, strongly biased here, but like, the way, the Michigan game being the penalty, the ultimate example here, right? Where we're John before the game, we're John after the game, but in the middle of the game, Jack Owen Foyer, as they've been calling him. And then we turn around for the Tennessee game after all that, before the game has even started, he's doing it again. And he's doing it at halftime. And he's doing it on the sideline. And I'm just, at some point I go, like, I know they won the game. Like, is Jack one of those guys where it's like, when it's on your team, you're a fan of it and it's annoying to everybody else? Or is it just obnoxious? Because I'm kind of leaning into this is just kind of obnoxious because he hasn't actually delivered on any of the 3 goals in his 4 years there.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from.
I just don't get it. I don't get it.
Where
it's
you're
like,
coming
you have
from.
Not won anything.
I get where you're coming from. I disagree with it. I think to me, it would depend. Like, let's say Ohio State would have lost to Tennessee and he would have had another outburst. Then I would be on your side. I'd fully agree. Okay, now you're just being a child. This has to stop. But I don't want one of my best defensive players, the leader of my defense, to come out and not be chirping in a high environment like that. I want a little bit of energy. I want a little bit of passion. I think it's one of those things where the Michigan is obviously going to be a black mark on his career because people are going to pinpoint his reaction, him ripping the flag. You're going to have a fan base, even at Ohio State, that's divided, where some people, myself included, were embarrassed by it because you didn't do anything. And you're going to have the other people that hail him as a hero because, he didn't let him plant the flag. I think for me, as a football guy, as a fan of the team, knowing that he's a leader, knowing that he's a vocal part of that locker room, I want to see him come out angry, passionate, fired up, ready to go. And I think when you're in a competitive environment like that, that's what's going to happen with it. So I think, to me, it would have been different if he was being a dirty player. Like, a lot of people, I think, would want to compare him to, like, for an NBA comparison, a Draymond Green. You love him as a teammate, hate playing against him. I think if he was out there taking cheap shots, sacking somebody and standing over him, being arrogant like that, I'd fall more in line with you. But I don't have a problem with trash talking. I actually really like it. Because it gives your team a little bit of juice, a little bit of energy. And if I'm being completely honest, it was at that moment where I thought, okay, Ohio State's got a really good chance tonight. Because I'm watching the way that Jack Sawyer and I'm watching the way that Ohio State's team is warming up pregame. They're feeling the crowd. They're over at the sidelines. They're chirping a little bit. And Tennessee is just looking ahead. They're walking slow. They're not running. They're not jogging. They are walking. And a lot of people were saying, oh, they're just locked in. They're locked in and ready to go. To me, I took that as that's the first win of the night. It is you've got the intimidation factors all on Ohio State's side. Not that I think them going and chirping, Jack Sawyer standing sidelines is not going to intimidate you a ton, but that was the moment that Tennessee knew, okay, these guys are going to bring it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get that. I think, one of the things that has just been really evident to me, and I'll lean fully into the Michigan side of this too, is I feel like I talk about this every other week, and I'll continue to until morale improves, is just Ohio State is the king of talking the talk without walking the walk for the last 4 years, right? The self-described, these are the 3 things we expect to do. We expect to beat Michigan. We expect to win the Big Ten. We expect to win a national title. We expect to accomplish our goals and have gone, 0 for 11 the last 4 years or whatever. That's where, Jack having the performance he did against Michigan. And again, it wasn't even that he necessarily played poorly.
No, I thought he played great.
It wasn't even a performance thing. It was just it was an outcome thing. It was it was a talking big and then nothing to back it up on the scoreboard at the end of the day.
And I think,
and so come out the next game and do the exact same thing. Like there is a level in which you want that from your leadership. There's also a level where you go, my guy, how about you execute and stop worrying about talking to the cameras?
But he did. And
he did in this game. And you're correct. But I'm saying, if that goes different, if this goes differently against Oregon, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like you do have to back it up. They have not to date until the Tennessee game, and I felt like at that point you do earn it a little bit, but it's also obnoxious for the rest of us.
Well, and here's the other part of that discussion too, because even against Michigan, I thought he played well. I thought he made good plays.
I'd agree with that.
The only blemish, I think, is that he had Mullins kind of in the backfield on that play that we talked about before Mullins ripped it off for 20-something yards. He should have made that tackle. That was a blemish on that day. But for the most part, that was not on him at all. And so I think part of that outburst that you saw was frustration at losing that game and failing at accomplishing a task that he came back for. And then I also think part of that was frustration at his own team. If I'm being honest, I think that's why that outburst happened, is because he did everything that he possibly could to win that game. He made the play at the end that you and I both agree felt like a game defining play that you would see for years to come, that Ohio State would go on a long drive, seal the deal. And his offense failed him that day. And I think part of it was the frustration that he felt like at the end of the day, he put himself and he put his team and the defense put that team in the best position to win that game. And Ohio State offense absolutely crumbled. And so I think it was a lot of that mixed in together that just came out to be a bad thing all around. And I think had he had a performance that was poor against Tennessee, I'd be more on your side. But I think because he played well against Michigan, because he has, in my opinion, backed it up, even if you take away the team goals, if you look at individual, what have you been able to do? He did well against Michigan. He did well against Tennessee. I'm fine if he's trash talking as long as he's performing well. Had he gone up against Tennessee and just been slammed to the ground and pancaked left and right and not been able to do anything, not apply pressure, then I'm going to be a little bit more annoyed. I'm going to be a little bit more over the attitude, and I'm going to want you to get your hard hat and your lunch pail ready and go to work before I see you lipping off again. But because he has been out there and been a force, I don't really take offense to it, but I see how others do.
For sure. And again, that's part of the beauty of college football, right? Is like you have those polarizing players, you have stuff like that. And so that's, there's a sense in which like it's fine for the game, but I can tell you like the jawing beforehand was one thing, but then like even like in the middle of the game, like looking over, look at whatever he said to the camera about
he said
they counted us out, but we're still here. I'm like, my guy, like you got beat 13-10 in your own building 3 weeks ago. Just play the game, play the darn football game. Which like, I mean, we're already there, so we may as well get into to Tennessee and Ohio State here. But I'm going to kind of let you. I'm going to let you lead this one because I'm on Zoom and it's hard for me to see you. But yeah, like I mean, where do you want to start with this game here? I mean, we talked about a little bit of it here, even in the discussion about Sawyer and the defense and the trouble that they gave Iamaleava and the offense for Tennessee.
Yeah, I there was so much to unpack from this game that impressed me. Ohio State's offense was unstoppable. I looked at this and it's easy to look at it and go, and I want to I'm going to end this by saying that I feel like the offense taking the foot off the gas, I'm not a fan of in a playoff environment. So I was a little disappointed in Ryan Day for that. I talked about it in my blog last week as preparation for the game. And I think I even did it on the podcast where it felt like where the fan base was at with Ryan Day was eerily similar to how Michigan fans were with Harbaugh. And this was his moment. This was Ryan Day's moment and the Buckeyes' moment to turn that leaf and decide which path they were going to take. This isn't me saying they're definitely taking that path. They're going to go on a 3-year run and blah, blah, blah. But this was the first step that they had to take. You had to go out there and you had to have a get-right game. And the offense absolutely did. I thought the play calling Chip Kelly had was brilliant. They attacked often and early. Outside of one drive, in the first half, they moved the ball at will. And you can look at the end of the half, and had they had more time, they were driving again. But you look at one drive that got actually stalled out and they were forced to punt. They had the turnover in the end zone that you can debate back and forth. Do I think it was an interception? Sure. Was there a pass interference? Absolutely. Both are true. I thought agree. It was one of those things. I was talking to a guy up in the press box at the game, and I said, those are the things that I'm not a fan of. I get taking a chance, trying to put them away, but instead of being up 21-0 now, or wait, no, they were up 21-0. It would have been 28. Yeah. It would have been 28-0. Now you gave them the ball back with a chance to go down and score, and still enough time to potentially get the ball back before half and everything. So I didn't like the execution of that. I thought it was a riskier throw, but I understood why they went for it. But the Ohio State offense just seemed to move at will. The offensive line, to give them some credit, there's been numerous big games this year. Penn State, I would say this game, where they've had to really stitch together something to make it work, and it's proven effective. You saw what they did against Penn State on the road. This was a game where people were talking about how the Tennessee defensive line was just as good as the Michigan defensive line, and Ohio State bullied them. And I think they won the rushing battle. It was slim. I think Ohio State had like 156 to Tennessee's 152 or something.
But it was close.
Ohio State didn't allow any sacks. They had 473 total yards of offense. They only let Nico pass for 104 yards the whole game. Nobody was getting open. When they were open, he was overthrowing them, underthrowing them left and right.
Yeah.
They were hitting hard. You had Cody Simon crack his helmet. You had Sonny Styles go in and get a big smack late in the game. And they just came out and they were the more physical. And you're going to make fun of this because Ryan Day always says we're a tough physical team. They were a tough physical team on Saturday, all across the board.
Yeah, I mean they did. They looked really good. Here's kind of where I'm gonna camp on is I'm going to. There's two things that can be true at the same time here for me from the Michigan side of this, right? Number one, like that was an almost flawless performance by Ohio State. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no way that unless you are just going to be the homer of homers that you can look at that and not be impressed with what Ohio State rolled out. So like there's a ton there that I agree with you on. They were a tougher team than Tennessee. There's no question about that. Mm-hmm. To get out to the lead they did with the speed they did. I mean, Tennessee was out of the game before it started, right? Like, I mean, it was 14-0, 7 minutes in.
Yeah.
I mean, and 21-0 by the end of the first. I mean, Tennessee was out of it. Tennessee was out of it before the first quarter ended. And so that type of momentum was obviously hugely instrumental. Like even going into the half 21-10 or whatever, when Tennessee failed to do anything with the opening drive, it was a lot like the Indiana game, right? Where when Ohio State was up on Indiana at the end of the half, you knew like, okay, well, this first drive for Indiana is going to tell you everything you need to know. And they proceeded to go 3 and out and punt the ball to Caleb Downs, who then said, "Thank you very much." Mm-hmm. And it was the same. It was the same. Very different games, but the same type of thing there. Where when Tennessee couldn't do anything there to start the second half, that little glimmer of maybe they can weasel their way back in was gone.
Yeah.
The big thing that I'm going to disagree with you on is that it's been interesting to watch. Obviously, it's been so much fun for me over the last 3 weeks, watching the narrative and the discussion around the football program, around Ryan Day after the loss to Michigan, because nothing that happened on Saturday against Tennessee is going to absolve whatever the heck that was against Michigan. The offensive line played better against what was supposed to be a pretty good Tennessee defensive line. They can have credit for that for sure. The offensive game plan was excellent. But the question is, where was that? What we talked a little while ago about, this version of Ohio State is going to run the table and win the whole thing. Yeah, maybe if they show up. But what happens when they don't? I think for Ryan Day, for Ohio State, for the goals that they have self-set, beating Tennessee at home in the playoff was one, necessary, absolutely, but was a bare minimum. Like that's not a, like there's a sense in which you're right that it was a get right game in one sense. Like I think it's hard to say, well, it wasn't at all. The way they played was outstanding, but that's also not and signature win is not really the phrase I'm looking for here, but I'm going to roll with it because I can't think of anything else right now.
But I mean, it fits.
But this coming off the Michigan game, like this was not the maybe this is better. This was not the saving grace game for Ryan Day and Ohio State.
No,
that game will happen in Pasadena next week.
Yeah, for sure. But I think to almost add on to your point, because I disagree that you can continue to look at the Michigan game, because at some point as a team, you've got to just take the L and you've got to move forward. And I think the players realize that. The players are disgusted. I think every person in that locker room would want that game back. I to this day don't understand the offensive game plan for that game, and I never will. And there's no use in me continuing to go back to it, because right now the focus has to be on Oregon, just like the focus had to be on Tennessee, because you still got a chance to win the entire thing. And I think that game plan was such an anomaly. It was such a rare occurrence. Not that I think they're going to come out and have this kind of performance against every single team, because I don't think so. But I think this proved to them, it gave them a little bit of confidence going into the playoffs. People talk about it all the time with the playoffs. The hotter that you come in, the better. And I think they were the best looking team from the first round. If I'm Oregon, which team do I want to play the least? Ohio State is the team I least want to play. I think for Ohio State, especially with Ryan Day, you nailed it right on the head. It's 100% beating Tennessee was the bare minimum. But what impressed me the most, for as much as I've gotten on Ryan Day's back recently, and I was talking to a guy up in the press box about this prior to the game kicking off, and I was just saying, hey, what are your thoughts, like Ryan Day overall? Where do you think he's got to land the ship this year to be safe? What side of the bridge do you stand on? And we both kind of agreed that, you can tell, and you agree with this too, because we've talked about it, the mentality that Ryan Day has, where the outside noise gets to him. And this, with all the pressure gleaming down on him, the 4 consecutive losses to Michigan, not making a Big Ten championship since 2019, no Big Ten titles recently, no championships recently. Everybody in Columbus calling for your job. You saw the College game day signs where people had signs right behind him while he's being interviewed that said Ryan's last day. Everything against him. His back is against the wall. And the game plan was beautiful. And for him, and I'm going to give credit where credit's due, because I think it showed a side of mental toughness that I think he's got to have going forward. Do I think that he'll have it consistently? We're going to find out. But I think that was a step in coming out there and blocking out the noise and just putting a good, beautiful game plan together and letting your playmakers walk the walk, letting the guys that you trust every single day at practice to go out there and perform. Let Will Howard sling the ball. Trust that you can get the ball to number 4 and he's going to do beautiful things with it, which he does. And I thought that was a phenomenal performance all around from the Buckeyes. And there were still things you could point out. There were still flaws to that game. But overall, I think from the second they kicked off, Ohio State was in cruise control through the majority of it.
No, they absolutely were. But what I'm saying is that the mentality around Ryan Day, with the lights being too bright and all the other stuff, none of that changed by beating Tennessee.
No,
like that was a have to have it. Yeah. I mean, you just went from a absolutely unforgivable loss to Michigan, which thank you, but it's an absolutely unforgivable loss from the Buckeyes. The only thing you avoided in Tennessee was a back-to-back unforgivable loss.
Well, and so I think
to actually get a get-right win, or to be a confident, let me put it this way, to actually change the perception. There's no perception shift around Ryan Day for beating Tennessee at home. Was it a great win? Sure it was. It was like I said, it was a near flawless execution. You've got to put another one together, though. And you've got to put another one together against, Oregon ain't Tennessee. Tennessee is a good team, and I'm not going to have, Tennessee is not actually very good. Like, no, Tennessee is a good football team. But also, that's not that is, again, that's what I mean by that's the bare minimum. Make the quarterfinals doesn't change the narrative around Ryan Day.
No.
If you go out and you beat Oregon, now we're talking, and those are self-imposed goals at Ohio State, right? We don't need to repeat them. You know them. If the offseason national champions want to proclaim natty or bust, that's what I'm going to hold you to. And so winning a first round playoff game is the first step towards doing those things, towards, and I think, beating Oregon in the Rose Bowl would absolutely be enough to save his job. I said last week, I thought if I'm a fan, he probably needs to win the whole thing. I still think that. I think, and I said it didn't really matter if he lost to the administration. I don't think it mattered if he won last weekend or not. I think he was going to keep his job either way. I think probably a more balanced approach between those things is probably less about, well, you have to win the whole thing, even though if that's your stated goal is natty or bust, I'm going to hold you to it. I think probably the more rational take there is you've got to go out and you've got to face some old demons in Oregon. And when the lights get bright there, you're going to have to pull it off. And so this win, while it was good, I don't think it does anything to shift the narrative from 3 weeks ago, because as much as the players and staff and all that have to move on from Michigan, you can't just ignore that. You from an evaluation of Ryan Day perspective, you can't just ignore that and go, well, you got to move on. No, like that is the biggest part of the evaluation for you, and you have not accomplished it repeatedly. Yeah. So there's got to be the Ohio State and Ryan Day, if they want a true, signature win in the season, they want a perception shift on their head coach. Oregon is going to be the game to get that done, not Tennessee. For sure.
And I partially agree with you. I think I tend to agree with you more than I would disagree on that. I think, and that was one of the wheel route questions that I figured we would get to, is did this win make Ryan Day's chair a little bit cooler? And I think the answer is yes, no. Like I think it took a little bit of the pressure, because I think people were ready to torches and pitchfork his house had they lost to Tennessee. I think a lot more people saw that performance and are probably swayed now to keeping him. I'm not. I'm with you, where I think you've got to come out and you've got to beat Oregon to really save your job, in my mind. I just have to see it again. And I look at this season and I see key wins. You had a key win against Penn State. You beat Indiana, whether I think that they were worthy of a 12-team playoff. I still think they were a good team. They had a lot of momentum coming in. They were a top 5 team. You handled your business. And then you beat Tennessee. Those are 3 key wins on your year, 3 top 10 wins on your season. I'm fine with that. I thought he proved enough to me that I feel more confident with him going forward, that they have a shot against Oregon.
But can he? And this is the big question that's floating around the internet, right? And we're just, we're content curators sometimes here. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, this is why you have to see it again, because again, in some cases, and shout out, I think this was T-Bone over at The Fan was talking about, this makes the loss to Michigan feel that much worse in some ways, right?
Yeah, I just don't the mentality to dwell on that is just gross to me.
The what? I'm sorry.
The mentality of, after every single thing Ohio State does, immediately jumping back to compare Michigan to the Michigan game is the absolute wrong mindset to have. You're fighting for a national championship.
That's what the rivalry is.
But we're not in the rivalry right now. You're not in the rivalry right now. You're competing for a national championship while Michigan sits at home waiting for their bowl game against Alabama with their 3rd-string quarterback playing.
Does that make you feel better?
A little bit. I mean, it does. The loss will never not suck. Having Ohio State lose to Michigan will always feel terrible. But if the season is still going on and you still have meaningful football games to play, you cannot have the mindset of, well, why could we not do? You and I can, because we're dissecting the game. But I'm sick of everybody trying to place this narrative that after everything Ohio State does good or well or bad, you've got to compare it to that game. The game happened. It's done. It's over with. You got to move on. You've got a beast ahead of you in Oregon. You had a beast coming into the shoe in Tennessee. You've got a bigger beast, though, in Pasadena. And you have zero room inside of your own head to be fighting that demon about whatever happened that you have no control to change. So you've got to look ahead. You got to look at what you had in the Tennessee game that you were able to do well, see what worked. You got to go in and maybe look back at the Oregon game, fix some of the stuff that you didn't do well there. And you've got to move ahead and start prepping. The continual, let's look back and see what happened in the game and why we couldn't put this together. You can't dwell on the past when you still got a chance at a natty, because you're just going to set yourself up for failure.
Within the Woody, you can't, for sure, but you nailed it. Like, for the folks that are dissecting this, it is absolutely valid to look at this and go, why would you not have wrote out this game plan? Because as you look ahead to Oregon, you go, what gives me confidence that you can roll this out again? Where was this consistently throughout the season?
But I think you can, because we did. Like, the Oregon game, to me, and I know that a loss is a loss is a loss. You lost that game. That was a coin flip game. Ohio State was right in it up until the very, very end of it. I mean, that was about as even. That was probably the best game I've seen all year. They were the only one that really put a little bit of fear in Oregon this year that they could possibly lose a game. And I think that gives me a little bit more faith. I do think, obviously, Oregon's going to be better. Ohio State's going to be better. But these are close games. These are close teams. And you've seen it. It's not like we've not seen them play this year. We saw them play. We saw them play at Oregon. Will Howard had his best game of the season, in my mind, against Oregon. Jeremiah Smith had a great game. The defense outside of our corners were fine.
I don't know that they were. They gave up 38 points. Or whatever it was, 32 points.
That's what I said, minus the secondary. And I think they've gotten better over time. They played phenomenal. And I think the Tennessee game itself actually helped warm them up a little bit better to a Dylan Gabriel, because they had to deal with a mobile quarterback.
So let's talk Ohio State, Oregon then. Let's do a quick sponsor thanks, because maybe you feel a little bit like Josh Heupel in Tennessee.
There it is.
You know what you're doing isn't working. You need to transfer in some help. Our friends at Elevated Integrity Construction are the portal to a successful project. Aaron and his team have been doing this for a long time. They communicate openly, honestly, leave you wowed at the finished product. Home, church, or business build, the folks with integrity in their name at elevatedintegrity.com. The Rivalry also proud to be part of the Varsity Network, powered by Learfield this season, a must-have for every college football fan. Free to download in the App Store and Google Play Store. Live college football games podcasts just like this one. So search for your team or the Rivalry podcast in the Varsity Network app. Also want to throw out there, especially now that we're in the postseason, Rose Bowl coming up here in about 10 days, and we are a small budget podcast, and we are trying to get Mr. JP there to Pasadena to cover that game.
Yeah, get me out of the cold weather.
To do what?
Get out of the cold weather.
If you would like to help support things like postseason travel, marketing the podcast, opportunities for next year, this doesn't happen without your support. So please, if you would, consider doing that. Rivalpod.com is the website, rivalpod.com. Click the support tab. You can buy yourself a t-shirt that supports the podcast, or you can click the little buy me a coffee link there. That supports the podcast as well. Helps us to be able to take advantage of opportunities that are presented that otherwise we may not be able to. So thanks, especially as we're in the thick of the postseason here, as we look ahead to next season. Thanks for considering support. Rivalpod.com. We are also on social media, as you should probably know by now, at RivalPod, Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube, where hopefully you're watching right now. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. So Oregon is coming back in, and we saw, and you mentioned this, Oregon and Ohio State played each other already this year. Mm-hmm. Here's where I agree with you. I firmly believe that the winner of this game wins the whole dang thing.
Yeah,
I think the winner of this, I mean, these are the two teams that talent for talent, it's Spider-Man meme in a lot of ways. We'll talk about trying to find margin separation here in a little bit, but I mean, these are the loss in Eugene is still a loss. Mm-hmm. It's still also, it is a 1-point loss because these teams are so similar. Now, these teams have also shifted a bit since then. Some of the personnel, some of the injuries, like those things matter, and we'll talk about it. But these are the two best teams in the country. I don't think there's much question about that. I think this is the de facto national championship game in my mind, as far as whoever wins it is probably going to go run the table the rest of the way.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, because you look at just the bracket in general. You've got Notre Dame going against Georgia. Georgia's got their backup quarterback that's going to be trotted out there, which makes that game a little bit more interesting to me. But then you've got Texas against Arizona State, Penn State versus Boise. And then you've got this one. And I think this is the one that every single college football fan is excited for between those four games. They are extremely evenly matched. I love what Dan Lanning has done there. I love his mentality as a coach. He's one of those guys, like how you feel about Jack Sawyer, that going to get, but I don't dislike him because I find him annoying. I dislike him because he's so good at what he does. Yeah. It's one of those things. It's a dislike out of respect, because I just admire the way he gets his team prepped. I admire the way he runs that program, the way he recruits, just a football dude through and through, which I just love the heck out of. Ohio State across the board, though, to me, matches up super evenly with them. I think what killed them last game was the secondary struggles, and then they allowed Dylan Gabriel to break off a handful of runs. I don't think they were ready for him to break off and break loose like he did, and that's why I was kind of excited to see how they would match up against Nico, because I thought if they've struggled against mobile quarterbacks, that's what's going to keep Tennessee in the game, and they kept him in check. They kept him in check throughout the entire game. The secondary, I want to shout out Davison Igbinosun, because I had a tweet ready and I didn't get to say it because the refs ruined it for me with an atrocious roughing the passer call. But I said I had a tweet ready to go. It was all typed out, and then they called the roughing the passer, but it said Davison Igbinosun holding on to literally the only thing that he could, which was the ball. Finally wasn't holding a jersey. The secondary has started to really get things together. I'm hoping. I just find it hard to believe that an occurrence that bad, like game one, where Denzel Burke, a guy that was talked about as a first round talent, just gets absolutely crisped all game long. I just have to think, even just for him mentally, he's going into this game ready for round two. The rest of the Buckeyes have to be feeling that same thing. Will Howard knowing, man, we were so close. We were right there. Jeremiah Smith, the same thing, because he had that pass interference call that set them up for the situation they were in. Had that not been called, Ohio State's got a great chance to walk away with a dub. And so I think they're hungry. They're motivated. They talked about it earlier in the season that they were ready to see these guys again. And I think Oregon's feeling the same way. I think they're ready to go out there and prove the exact opposite. That no, we won that game. We are the better team, and we're here to win the whole thing. And I am jacked about this. I think it's hard to find stuff that really separates it. I think it's going to come down to the quarterback battle for me. And you're going to have another performance like Will Howard did against Oregon the first time, or against what he did against Tennessee. You're going to have that kind of performance. You're going to have to find ways to run the ball. That was a game that they struggled to run the ball in. Yeah. A lot of that was because they went the second half of the game without one of their best All-American linemen. Now you're down two of them. The best center in college football is out now.
And I think that for me, when we talk about trying to find margin or trying to find separation between these teams, to Ohio State's credit, this is one of the places of separation that I expected from the Tennessee game too. And I thought the offensive line was up to the task. At the same time, I think you'd be out of your mind to think that Oregon and Tennessee are on the same level.
No,
right? Again, Oregon and Ohio State, despite all the things that I've said and believe about this Ohio State team, their performance against Michigan and all that, these are still talent for talent, the two most talented teams in college football, right? I don't know that it's particularly close. That doesn't mean that they couldn't lose to Texas or something like that. It doesn't mean that. But talent for talent, I think these are the two best teams in the country. And I don't think that there's a lot of pushback on that. But I think when we're talking about trying to find separation, trying to find margin, you have to look at the offensive line for Ohio State.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that Oregon did not have in the first matchup is they did not have Jordan Birch. They did not have that talented edge rusher in that game either. And so now you've got your full contingent on the defensive line if you're the Ducks against an offensive line for Ohio State completely different. What does it look like to rotate offensive linemen in this game? Right? Because this game is, it's not going to be just like it's, to your point, just like you don't want to say, hey, copy paste from the Michigan game because it's a different team, different game. Okay, well, you can't copy paste from Tennessee because it's a different team, different game, right? When Will Howard has time to throw the ball, he's this is true of any quarterback, but but Will in particular,
except
here,
for Drew Howard.
Right? Like, why was Will Howard so good against Tennessee? One of the main he's a talented quarterback, but the main reason he was so good is he had time. He had time. And also to Chip Kelly's credit, they got the ball out fairly quickly. Mm-hmm. Like the game plan schemed around, they talked about, how did they phrase it? It was something like eliminating, minimizing their weaknesses, like that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. The speed on the perimeter and these quick passes, you're going to have to see a lot more of that. But also Oregon now has seen that on film, right? And now can adjust their defense to that. But he's going to have time because if like in the Michigan game, if he ends up just under duress, I don't think Michigan recorded any sacks. This goes back to something you said earlier. I don't think Michigan recorded any sacks of Howard in that game, but they were living in the backfield. Mm-hmm. There's a reason that he was seeing ghosts and having to get the ball out quick and wasn't reading the field well. And so with Jordan Birch back on that line with a chance to go up against Ohio State, that's going to be a big thing. I don't know that Ohio State's offensive line is up to the challenge. Maybe they are, but I think that's the big moment of separation there. For Ohio State, the strength is going to be running out the exact same game plan you had against Tennessee, right? Getting the ball to your playmakers. Can you continue running the ball well? Can you continue the execution and getting the ball out quickly? What does that look like now that Oregon has seen that game plan and can adjust their defense? It's going to be a chess match between Lanning and Day, and I guess Lanning and Kelly, or however you want to, whoever. It's a coaching chess match here, and that's where again, between the offensive line and the chess match coaching, it's just unsurprisingly, I've got to lean Oregon in this, but I don't think that this is going to be a real tight football game either way.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a close game regardless. I think what gives me a little bit more hope this time around is I was watching the Big Ten championship game where Oregon allowed a Penn State offense to be right there with it. It was a shootout. And I think if I'm looking at the offenses, I go, Penn State's able to move the ball like that? Ohio State's got a heck of a lot more weapons than that.
They do, but I think Penn State's offense has really come into its own though as well. I think both are true.
Yeah, it was, to me, that was the best performance Penn State could have put together, and it still wasn't enough. But that was the absolute ceiling for how their offense can perform. Yeah. And that's like an average performance for Ohio State in my mind. And so I'm looking at that and I'm going, if they're able to move the ball like that, that's good news for us. And so I do think, though, at the end of the day, and it might sound like I think Ohio State's going to go out there and just blow the doors off them. I don't think that at all. My final score here, I got Ohio State 34, Oregon 28. I still think you get some points up on the board. I think it's a lot closer than people want. My hope is that Ohio State, having to go up against Nico and a mobile quarterback, has helped prep them. I think they learned from their mistake because there were a couple times in that first Oregon game where they had Dylan Gabriel and the Ducks on 3rd and longs numerous times, and he was able to pick it up on his feet. I noticed against Nico and Tennessee that they were able to have a quarterback spy. Most of the time it was weirdly JT that they were putting as a quarterback spy, and there were a couple times he got his ankles broke, and there were other times he made the play, and I think you kind of live and die by that. It'll be a mix of him and Cody Simon doing it. But I think they've learned a little bit from that. I think the secondary's ready for a get-right game for round 2. And I think Will Howard's going to be motivated. He got a lot of criticism after that game. A lot of people, that's where kind of the Kyle McCord versus Will Howard debate got sparked up again. And I think this team is hungry right now. And I just think when a team is this close, it's hard to beat them twice.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't know that. I obviously I'm going to take Oregon here. I don't disagree. I don't think you're off. I don't think you're off base at all. It is hard to beat a team twice. And I feel like sometimes that gets thrown around And it's like, well, that automatically means that, you can't do it. It's like, no, you can, but you've seen each other already. You know what the weaknesses are, and by that same token, Oregon has seen Ohio State's weaknesses already too. And so I think it will be a really interesting battle because, again, Ohio State, even more than their offense, like I think maybe not more, but like Ohio State's defense creating pressure on Gabriel can be a big factor in this game. It's going to have to be. The difference that I would draw out there, and this is not a post-mortem going, well, Tennessee wasn't that good. Like I hate when people do that. But there is also that reality of what I've been saying of Tennessee's not Oregon, though.
No.
And Nico Iamaleava, as mobile of a quarterback as he is, I mean, Dylan Gabriel's a Heisman finalist for a good reason, right?
Well,
this is probably
Kyle
the best
McCord was a
quarterback
top
in the
10 Heisman voter.
What's that?
I said Kyle McCord was also top 10 in the Heisman. So I'm not saying it's the same. Dylan Gabriel was significantly better.
Gabriel was top 3, and is probably the best quarterback in the country. And so that's where I'm curious, if they run that spy, you were able to slow down Nico, but Gabriel's not Nico, and Gabriel also knows how to pass the ball downfield.
Well, and I think that's the difference.
The other big thing too that I think is worth mentioning too is as good as Ohio State bottled up the Tennessee run game, Dylan Sampson barely played that game.
He got hurt, yeah.
And so that's both not to take anything away from Ohio State's defense, but also if you are able to, when you're able to zero in on just one piece, on one piece there, like that helps. When you're one of the best running backs in the country is not playing in this game, that gives your defense a lot more comfort, right? You're able to zero in on some things. You're not gonna be able to do. Like you're not gonna be able to do that with Oregon. They've got between James at running back, Holden and Johnson, and that's the other thing too is even in that first game, because he's an idiot. You had the spitting incident with Ignosin, and so was that Trayshawn Holden or Tez Johnson? I think it was Tez.
I thought it was Tez.
So Tez Johnson didn't even play, and rightly so, by the way. Tez Johnson didn't even play in most of that game. Jordan Birch didn't play in most of that game. So you've I don't know. It's a coin flip game, but the margin for me fall to Oregon, and until they show me otherwise, I mean, it's a 13-0 team. I mean, I'm going to take them 38-35 over Ohio State. There's really not much more to say that I haven't already said. I think they've just got as talented of weapons as Ohio State has. I think Oregon's just got that little bit of an edge. And I think the battle in the trenches at the offensive line, I think is going to be a struggle for Ohio State in this game. If they come out and they scheme it up really well and they can execute well, yeah, of course Ohio State can win this game.
Yeah.
I'm just not convinced that we're going to see a replication of Saturday. And the other thing I want to throw out there too is in the game against Tennessee, yes, you had the pregame adversity or whatever you want to call it, right? The noise around you. There was no in-game adversity for Ohio State to overcome in that game. You were up 21-0 before Tennessee could blink. If that doesn't happen, and again, obviously you want a fast start. You want that to happen. You want your team to be up. Ohio State has been notorious for slow starts this year. They didn't have that. And look what a difference that made. But if it doesn't happen, if you are in a nail biter, if you do find yourself down, if you find yourself down by a couple scores, the response and the belief is easy when you're up 21-0 in the first quarter. The response and belief and the mental fortitude gets a lot tougher when it's not that. And so I'm very curious to see if indeed Ohio State does not get out to this just astronomical lead. What does that look like when push comes to shove? I think it's going to be very, very interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I think you saw a glimpse of it the first game because I don't think, much like Tennessee, I don't think a lot of people thought that game was going to go that way. I would be surprised if either team in this game got out by multiple scores early.
Maybe 10.
It's
maybe 10.
Yeah, but you're not going to see a 21-0 start for either of these
not.
teams. I would be stunned. And so I think you saw it with the first game because it was back and forth for a majority of it. And Ohio State had their back against the wall going down, and they put themselves in a good chance to win it up until the very, very end. But I do think the one thing both of us agree on, you already said it, whoever wins this takes the natty in my mind. I don't think no other team impressed me enough. I'm not nervous about a Georgia team. Texas, sure, but even against Clemson, I didn't think they looked overly impressive. I'm not nervous about a Penn State. Yeah, I'm not nervous about a Penn State, Boise. I'm not nervous about an Arizona State should they go. I mean, none of those intimidate me. Oregon is the one.
Well, and I'll say this too. When we talk about, this goes back to beating Tennessee is the bare minimum. Beating Oregon, and again, you hold these in tension with, holding them to natty or bust. You have 3 goals. You're not accomplishing 2 of them. You better go finish off the last one. It's, in one sense, it's not enough to just beat Oregon. You've got to go win the whole dang thing. Mm-hmm. There is a sense, though, there's also within that the reality of beating Oregon would be such a confidence boost and a legitimate one for this team. I know beating Tennessee is a confidence boost, and it was a good win. Very different things.
Yep.
Very different things from we won a first round playoff game at home to we went out west and won the Rose Bowl against an old demon and have ourselves a legitimate shot at this whole thing. Those feel very different to me. And so the boost, the momentum, the belief, and the path that you've then created for yourself, because you have a very difficult path to the final, it's just hard to see. It's hard to see the winner of this game losing in the semifinals or the final. It really is.
Yep. I'm right there with you. I think the Tennessee game was a good confidence boost. It's what you needed to get ready mentally for the Oregon game. The Oregon game's the one you had circled. Not that you were super looking ahead, but if you go out and you beat an Oregon team that's undefeated, everybody's got marked as this is the national championship this year. They're going to take home the natty, and you go out there and you beat them. You prove to yourself that you have what it takes to get it done, and that's all you need moving forward.
So the last thing that we want to talk about in this here is because we are the rivalry. Like, obviously Ohio State's getting the coverage because they're in the college football playoff. They've got the big games coming up. Because of the holiday season, it feels weird to do this 10 days out from it. Kind of like we're doing with the Oregon game, right? Yeah. But we need to preview just briefly. We do need to touch on the Michigan side of this as well as they get ready to go up against Alabama. It's a noon kick Eastern time on New Year's Eve down in Tampa. And here's the biggest problem with trying to preview Michigan, Alabama is who in the world is playing in this game?
Yeah.
And again, especially, and that's why I mentioned being, 10 days out or whatever it is. We're recording this on the 23rd of December, right before the holidays, right? It's tough because you may have guys jumping in the portal. You may have guys opting out before any of this game gets played, So like right now, Jalen Milroe is as of now still playing in this game.
So from a Michigan fan, because I've not kept up with this yet, have there been any notable Michigan players that have already come out? I've seen people that have said they're going to the draft and everything. Yeah. Have there been players that have come out and said, I'm not going to be playing in the bowl game?
Like just a straight up opt out?
Yeah.
There probably have been. I don't know if there's anybody notable. I know Donovan's not playing, and I assume that for some of the seniors and stuff, or some of these guys, like I assume an opt-out is a draft declaration, even though it's
so like a Mason Graham, a Colston Loveland, a Will Johnson, a Don. Yep. Not expecting to see any of those if you're a Michigan guy.
Correct. Mason Graham has already declared. Kenneth Grant, to my knowledge, has not, but you can go ahead and write that one right next to Mason Graham. Colston Loveland has declared for the draft. Will Johnson's declared for the draft. Dono has said he's not playing, which is a draft declaration, right? So, for Michigan, it's going to end up being a lot of younger guys, which I think is a really good thing. Like the matchup with Alabama we've said this before, it's a money grab, right? Like for yeah, we're thrilled that Michigan beat Ohio State. This still isn't a great Michigan team. Okay, I'm not even sure that it's a good Michigan team as much as it's a 7-5, maybe a little above average Michigan team. That's about it. And the strength of Michigan has been that interior defensive line of Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, who will not play this game. You'll also be, like we mentioned, you'll be without Colston Loveland and Will Johnson, which, in Columbus, he didn't need them. So there's that. People forget that Loveland and Johnson did not play in that game and Michigan still won. It's a delight. So it's a chance for some young to get in there. TJ Guy, you assume will play. Derek Moore, you assume will play. Rayshon Benny. Like, Michigan still got talent there, but it's not all Americans, right? What does Alabama look like? Who knows? We mentioned Jalen Milroe. Will he play in this game? I doubt it. But as of right now, by my last check, yes.
I would be surprised. I would be surprised if he ended up playing. The thing that I kind of am curious on is Ryan Williams. I
would assume so. I would assume he'd play.
But do you ultimately? This is the issue with now having the system the way it is you have all these players opting out, not going and playing. I know he's a freshman. He's 17 years old. Maybe he's 18 and had a birthday and is 18 now. But he's going to most likely, he's a young kid. Do you even risk a potential devastating injury for a game that ultimately isn't meaning anything? Like a Jalen Milroe, my guess is that he's not playing. But would it surprise me if he did? Not really, only because I could see him going and playing to try and improve his draft stock a little bit better.
Sure. Yeah.
That's the only reason, and I'm surprised Donovan Edwards is sitting out for that same reason, because to me, that was his chance to help kind of improve that a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Don needs the bowl game. And that's where I just don't know. Is it going to be, is Kalel going to play in this game? Is it, my guess is going to be it's Benjamin Hall, it's Jordan Marshall. Who trots out at quarterback for Michigan? Is it Davis Warren? Is it Jaden Davis? Do we throw 1 week of practice Bryce Underwood in there? I don't know. No, you don't do that.
Could he technically play though?
I was wondering that.
I don't think
we should know this. I would guess you could, because you're allowed to you're practicing.
Well, I think you can do like scout team stuff, because I know like Ohio State had a couple of guys that were early enrollees, and they were actually sidelined standing right next to me in the fourth quarter this past weekend. Yeah. They're not dressed in uniform. They're just in their Ohio State sweats and jackets and all that. But they practice and they run as the scout team.
Yeah, so maybe not, but in either, you're not going to see him either way. Yeah. But
could you imagine?
I'd enjoy seeing Jaden Davis out there. I think that is worth more than And I mentioned last episode, like, Davis Warren has earned the starting job in this bowl game, and I still maintain that he has. What would I like to see? I'd like to see Jaden, because you want you want to see what you've got in the fold, right? And I don't know, the kid could transfer out in the offseason with the Underwood signing. Who knows? But for right now, he's a Michigan quarterback. And I'd like to see what do you have in the fold, and what better opportunity to get reps for guys like Jaden Davis, Jordan Marshall, whoever, than live reps against Alabama, right?
Yeah. Well, and if you're a Michigan
that doesn't
guy,
mean anything.
If you're a Michigan guy, you bring in a guy like Underwood. I think the noise all over the nation, especially in Ann Arbor, is that's QB1 next year, is what people are talking about. And whether that ends up being true and whatnot, sure. But if that ends up being the case, I mean, you didn't go spend the NIL for him to not go and play. You look at a guy like that, and then you look at a Jaden Davis, and you go, okay, well, this is our future. And if I'm Jaden Davis, I'm going, that's clearly who they want as QB1. It's time for me to get going. It almost is a do-right by him to give him the start so he can get some in-game tape to be able to then go and pitch out to some of these other schools, get a chance to get a better recruiting offer, maybe some more NIL.
I don't think that at all. Like, you're not responsible for giving a kid tape to go to a different school. Like, you're trying to make the best decision for you. If he starts the game, it's because their intention is, we want to keep you on the roster, because as of recording time, Michigan doesn't have a transfer in the portal or a transfer from the portal yet. Mm-hmm. They've got some different guys that they're poking around at.
Well, and they're losing two of them.
They've not signed anybody yet. So right now, you are looking at Jaden Davis being on the roster and going, well, you and Underwood are going to compete for the starting job right now.
And technically, aren't they the only two quarterbacks on the roster outside of Underwood?
Because Davis Warren's going to still be there.
Well, no. I'm saying right now, because of transfer portal, you have Denegal that left. And then you also had, I'm blanking on his name, but he was a starter, Alex Orji. Alex Orji's left. Yeah. And so right now, Jack Tuttle is retired, medically retired. So right now, your only two quarterbacks in that roster outside of Underwood are Davis Warren and Jaden Davis.
Yeah.
And so it's got to be one of them, because I don't think the Underwood could start, and I don't think he would regardless.
And he wouldn't anyway. So all that to say, like, if you're Michigan, you try and get in as many guys that are going to be coming back or that you want to see come back as you possibly can. And I'd love to see, now that Kirk Campbell's been launched to the moon and left there, I would love to see them just open up, just open it up. Like, what do you have to lose?
Yeah.
You're still going to have to play within your strengths. It's still not going to be a great offensive performance. But like, let loose. These are live reps against Alabama for, that don't matter, that you're not going to get, that will pay dividends. Mm-hmm. Let's say Jaden Davis starts next year. Don't you think that live reps against Bama, whoever sits out or doesn't, whatever, is going to pay dividends going into Oklahoma next year?
Mm-hmm.
Going to play Nebraska, going to play Ohio State. Like, don't you think that's going to matter? Of course it will. So that's why I'd like to see the absurdity of a 7-5 Michigan team with the nation's most incompetent offense playing a team with an argument for the CFP is ridiculous. But this is what you've been given, so you may as well just go let loose. Because if Alabama blows you out, guess what? It doesn't matter.
And if you win, it doesn't really matter.
And Michigan's been in thankfully over the last 3 years, like, Michigan's been in the position where those postseason games did matter the last 3 years. This is the first time in a bit because they didn't play a bowl game in COVID year. And this is the first time since 2019 that Michigan's played a postseason game that didn't matter. And so, like, take advantage of that. Like, obviously that's not where you want to be, but take advantage of the opportunity, if you will, too. Without Michigan's interior defensive line strength, I just don't see them bringing much to the table here. Who opts out, who plays, who starts, who does whatever. This feels like an Alabama game, right? Alabama doesn't want to be there either. I've got 27-13 for Bama.
We are so close.
It just, again, this is where, and it sounds like, well, it does matter. It doesn't matter. You beat Ohio State and that's your goal, right? No, it's not the season you wanted to have, but you beat your rival. That's the goal. And so you are now trying to prepare yourself for next year by letting the young guys get in there, get live reps against a good Alabama team. And if if it all goes to heck at the end of the day, who cares? Like, these are good live football reps. That's going to help you for next year.
Mm-hmm. I've got final Bama 27, Michigan 10. So we're not far off at all for the exact same reasons. Michigan just doesn't have it in my mind. There's going to be too many of their strengths sitting out. Even if Milroe is out, I still have enough faith in what Alabama's going to bring to the table to be able to pull out that win convincingly. It'll be a nice little warm-up game to being able to watch. I forget who the first playoff game is that night because the other three are the next day.
It's Penn State Boise.
So that'll be a nice little warm-up that I'll get to enjoy before watching some real meaningful football. But yeah, it's going to be a good time. Michigan's going to lose. It'll be a nice way to close it out. Is watching them get destroyed. I'm going to convince myself that it matters for that couple of hours that I'm watching it, and it'll be great.
See, and the thing is, like, I will believe and know, like, hey, this doesn't really matter. But if you think I'm not still going to stand in front of my TV with my arms crossed for 3.5 hours and grumble furious about plays, you'd be ridiculous. Of course, I'm going to do that. That's what I do.
I'm right there with you.
What's that?
I said I'm right there with you.
Yep. Good stuff, man. Anything that we didn't hit on? A bit of a longer episode today because, again, we will not have an episode next Monday. So we are taking the week off on the 30th. That's why we're previewing Oregon now. That's why we're previewing Michigan, Bama now. Yep. Longer episode to try to cover all those things today. Is there anything we did not get to that you want to get to? Because the next time we record will be Thursday Thursday morning, January 2nd, right after the playoff games.
Yeah, I think I'm good. I think we've covered everything. I do want to give a quick shout out, though. I didn't get to it during our Tennessee segment. I ended up, because I got there crazy early, because I'm just a nervous guy like that. So I was there crazy early on Saturday at the shoe. I wanted to beat out traffic, wanted to make sure I took everything in. And so I was walking around. I got over to where the player tunnel is for the visitors right when the Tennessee Volunteers were showing up. And I was surrounded by a pack. I mean, just a mob of Tennessee fans. Lovely people. Lovely people. That is not a slight at all. I actually had really good conversation with a handful of them. Ended up talking about the podcast, getting to share that I was a Buckeye, kind of what we do. Lovely people. I hope they're listening. They gave them some cards. They said they were going to check it out. I will say, however, my one slight, why are they copying? I feels like the same teams have the exact same chant over and over, because I guess I've only ever heard Michigan fans do this, but where they say it's great to be Michigan and that whole thing, they do the same thing. Did you know that? They do the same thing. They say it's great to be a Tennessee Volunteer. And I was a little disgusted. Get your own. Get your own.
Yeah.
I don't know who did it first. Whoever did it second, get your own.
I'm going to assume that is not original to Tennessee, and it does not have the same ring to it.
It does. It was a little weird. Everything else, great.
Like, a Tennessee Volunteer also sounds like you're like stacking chairs at the local church. Like
I did see a shirt in the stands that I wanted to buy, but I knew it wouldn't get here in time, that just said, "All my homies hate Dolly Parton." And I just desperately needed that.
I think we just found the title of this week's episode.
As it should be. All my homies hate Dolly Parton.
Homies hate Dolly Parton.
It was glorious.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. For as well as Tennessee fans traveled in that game, right? Like, I mean, there was a lot made about Neyland North and whatever else. It's a shame the football team didn't travel with them.
Well, you know what, though? Here's a shout out to the Tennessee Volunteer fan base, because, and this is not even, this isn't a slight at all. The level of trash talk that they had was exactly the healthy level that it should be. It was great. It was petty. It wasn't insulting. It wasn't harmful or careless. Naming the shoe Neyland North is hysterical. And it's even better when your team dominates that team 42-17.
It was kind of like when, I don't know if you saw this, but like SMU had a whole bunch of like private boosters and stuff that flew in on these private jets and got delayed trying to get to Happy Valley for the game. And they're like being bussed from the private airport or whatever it is. And it's like, the game's out of hand. It's like, can you divert the bus?
Oh, I did see that. Yeah.
To the airport
I saw somebody, it was a group of Tennessee fans that had taken a map of the shoe and they had drawn like a line to where they were going to go to the Scioto River and they were going to throw the goalposts after the game. And they had like mapped out their path. And after the game, somebody from the Ohio State side tweeted it out and said, coincidentally, this is also how you get to Highway so-and-so to take your butts back to Tennessee. And I thought that was just the perfect comeback. The level of trash talk from both sides that I saw firsthand, I'm sure you have some idiots here and there that were ruining it for everybody. But for the most part, it was just two crazed fan bases coming together. All the talk about, well, Tennessee was going to do a Tennessee takeover of the shoe. There were a good amount of Tennessee fans, but they were not as loud as the Buckeye fans. It was pretty even.
Do you know why?
Because they lost. They were down. Yeah, because they were all. I saw numerous people later that night that said they went back to their hotel room to finish watching the game because it was cold. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, just.
Yep. It was a great time. I had a phenomenal time at the shoe. First one ever. A great one to start with.
Be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening right now. Follow @RivalPod. Like we mentioned, we're trying to get old JP there to the Rose Bowl. So if you want to support the podcast, and again, if that doesn't happen, it'll go towards marketing efforts and all that stuff for next season. RivalPod.com. Click on the support tab. Be sure to follow @RivalPod across social media as well. And no episode next week. We'll be back on January the 2nd. January the 2nd, right after the CFP quarterfinals, to break down whatever in the world happens with Oregon and Ohio State. And we're excited about that one. So thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. We appreciate it.
Go Bucks.
The Rivalry is a production of River Radio Ministries. Want live updates from the show? Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RivalPod. To learn how to support the show, shop our merch, and read our blogs, visit RivalPod.com. Make sure to follow us wherever you're listening now. And if you like what you're hearing, tell a friend so they can listen too.